working with customers, building the right skills in dealing with customers, and understanding their issues are a common element of any business role in any company. Hi, I'm Vijay Sundaram, and I lead strategy at Zoho. Today we will look at some common sales issues faced by most teams. We'll take up about 3 or 4 of them and understand each in some detail. The first one on the table is right here. It's dealing with failure. No matter what you experience, every salesperson has to deal with failure at some point in their career. It's the nature of the job. So the question really is, how do you get back on track? How do you learn from that setback? How do you revive that fundamental energy that's essential to every sales process? I'm going to share with you a personal example from my own experience. I had been involved many years ago in a complex multi-party deal, which involved several entities working across a long period of time. The process drew out. It had a lot of initial promise, but it kept getting drawn out and ultimately it failed. So what could you learn from something like that? So I've looked back and seen the things that I could have done differently on that deal. The first thing I took back from that process was the deal was too complex. It needed to be decomposed. We needed to create some partial outcomes. We needed to create partial or intermediate commitments that the different parties could make. So this would allow one party to follow the commitment made by another rather than wait for the whole deal to come together. Make things more simple when the deal itself is fundamentally complex. The second thing you can do in a sales slump to revive your energy is to build your confidence back. And the way you do that is to look at your own successes. The best example of successes are the ones you've executed yourself. So go back, look at some of the deals that you've done well and see what worked out. Pull those lessons back that you followed earlier so you can bring them back to the table now. This will bring back your self-confidence, show you that you can do it. Remember, a salesperson only gets better in time. Sales skills don't dwindle, they just compound. So go back, pick those examples where you were successful and execute them once again. Let's take the second issue, engaging with uninterested prospects. Oftentimes in your sales process, a prospect has lost interest in your offering. They were interested up to a point, but they're no longer receptive to your ideas. What can you do to rekindle that? So let's take a couple of ideas. The first one is to play the long game. A lot of deals and transactions happen over time. They're built on the back of relationships. The first engagement is often not the last. So play the long game. Stick with the client. Stick with the prospect. Stay engaged. So let me give you some examples. One way you might do that is to send them something of interest or value. So this could be an industry report. This could be something specific to the segment they participate in. Some news item that you thought is of relevance to them. So they can look upon you as a person still engaged, still looking after their interest. It sends the right signal. What's another thing you can do? Is to revisit your previous engagement with them. So let me give you some examples. Sometimes an objection could be in the context of, say, data security or perhaps data privacy. Perhaps your presentation didn't quite capture that well enough or deeply enough. So when you re-engage, you come back and you engage back on that topic. You come back with a better explanation. You come back with more supporting information. Hopefully, you might even have improvements in your offering, in your product or your service that addresses that fundamental issue. So what is the signal you're sending? First, that you've listened to the customer, you've understood their objections, you've done your homework, and you've come back with a better offering. Even if it isn't perfect, chances are that you are not the only vendor who suffered from this shortcoming. However, now you are the vendor that came back with a positive response and a tailored approach to that objection. I encourage you to do that every time you feel you've missed out on a sale. Let's take the third issue, selling to solve business problems. Every salesperson must understand the needs of the customer, but it actually goes beyond that. The solution they provide to the customer must therefore be cast in that context. So how can a salesperson bring this kind of focus to their sales process? The first thing you do is you focus on business outcomes of the customer. You're not merely selling a product or a service. Your product or service is simply a means to achieve a specific outcome for your customer. So understand that first. Another tactic that I've used in the past is to role play. Take on the role of your customer. Insert yourself in their context. Understand the different elements of that context, their corporate strategy, their CEO's stated objectives, perhaps the expectations of the stock market, some of their organizational constraints. So when you put yourself in that context, you're in a better position to understand how they're going to make that decision. What are the things that would help them make good decisions? What are the situations that will prevent them from moving forward? So once you do that, you can then wear back your own sales hat and position against that specific context. This is the essence of value selling. Knowing the business outcomes, knowing the specific context of your customer, and positioning your sale in that context. Issue number 4, advising new sales reps. You've hired a young sales team. They appear to have the energy and the drive. What is the advice you should give them? I would suggest 2 areas that you should focus on. The first one is building up knowledge. So where do you build up knowledge in the sales team? The first one is going to be on the industry. Get them to learn the industry. This is relatively easy to do today. There are a lot of publicly available reports that tell you about the industry, the competitive pressures, the different vendors, the value that customers look for, evolution, trends, all of those things. This is something every sales rep owes to themselves, knowledge of the industry. The second part of knowledge is knowledge of the product. A salesperson should be a complete expert in their product or service. You shouldn't have to fly in an expert to explain the nuances of your product. That shows a lack of planning. So be prepared to know the details of your product and be able to explain it and address customers' issues around that. That is the way to build their confidence in your ability to represent your company properly. The third area of knowledge is in the area of the customer. You need to research the customer before the deal. Understand their context, understand their pressures. So putting all these 3 things together, learning the industry, mastering your product, and researching the customer together constitute the first element of preparation, which is building up your knowledge. Dealing with integrity. The first rule of a sales rep is to be honest. There are often times in deals where you realize your product or service may not be the right fit for the customer. It is your duty to bring that up. You don't have to be shy about this. There are often ways to get around this. Oftentimes, there are workarounds. Sometimes, there are future directions the product would take that would match up with the client's requirements. Be creative. But first, build the confidence in the customer that you're representing accurately what you can bring to solve their business issue. The other thing that happens in the sales process is commitments. As a salesperson, you make several commitments to your customer. You would hope that they make commitments to you. So part of that process of showing your integrity is to honor those commitments. When you make those commitments, note them down and show to the customer that you're willing to commit against them and see them through. 2 things you should make sure that every one of your new sales team knows. The first is to build up their knowledge, and the second one is to learn how to deal with integrity. Happy selling.